So I started like on Twitter, and I think that when something pops off in Twitter, it does really well.
100,000 wishlist in just a few months. When I heard that my guest today accomplished this on his first game, I was sure it was through short form vertical content. That's actually not what happened.
But no, this was like a normal announcement trailer because the tweet, if I'm not mistaken, it has like 10 million views, which is unbelievable. It's wild. I wasn't necessarily looking like specifically for a good hook, but I think a consequence of the whole direction I went is that it created a good hook.
This is Andre Cardoso, and he doesn't just know about good hooks in Twitter. He also is tapped into a side of development that is oftentimes overlooked.
I'm very aware that I'm living a moment that is very unique, and I'm very grateful for it. No, game development is hard to like have an idea and have imposter syndrome and think like, oh, is this really all of that? As you may notice, I focus a lot on the emotional aspect, but I do think it's important.
He's here today to share all, from the emotional aspects of game dev to some tactical nitty-gritty advice on how he's created such a successful marketing campaign for this very exciting game.
Because at the end of the day, it is extremely important not just to get eyes on your game, but to get the reality, which is like just gamers. I think it's easier to move to the concept of interpretations rather than right or wrong.
Something I have appreciated about this conversation with you, Andre, is that you are tapped into that sort of mental and emotional piece.
You know, like that's the kid inside of me going like...
Andre, you just hit 100,000 wish list for Eye of the Match. Congratulations, first of all. That's amazing. Would love to kick off this conversation with around that topic. How have you been able to do that?
First, thank you for having me. I've been watching a lot of your videos, so this is really exciting. So I don't think there's like a recipe, you know. I think there's a mixture of a lot of variables in play that so happen that that kind of thing happens. And it's very rare, but I do think that there's a lot of effort that I put. Of course, I'm not going to deny the part that I crafted a lot of the experience to make it look nice, feel nice, and a lot of the things. But I think I probably underestimated the football, soccer, whatever you want to call it. I think I underestimated the power of the sport in general, right? And I think that whenever you have something that is so popular and an area such as refereeing or B-sides of that thing, you immediately kind of like stand out in that way, right? So I do think there's a little bit of the responsibility of the amount of wish list there. But yeah, it's just an incredible dream come true. It's really hard to explain because if I knew how to do it, I would just do it every time. But I am very aware that I'm living a moment that is very unique, and I'm very grateful for it. But I will say that yes, I think football, and I think not only football, but also this perspective of putting you in a role that you usually don't occupy are things that are super powerful. You'll see a lot of people talking about the fact that like your game has to have a good hook and stuff. I wasn't necessarily looking like specifically for a good hook, but I think a consequence of the whole direction I went is that it created a good hook. So at the end of the day, in combination with the craft, I think we reached out this incredible point.
Yeah, well, thank you for watching the pod. Didn't know you were a fan, so appreciate you enjoying those episodes and joining the club of being on here. Just a little bit more tactically, we'll kind of jump back to this idea of maybe hook or maybe what some call fantasy. But where have you been sharing Eye of the Match to get those 100,000? Or because a lot of people that have really popped off that I've interviewed recently have done like short form, like YouTube Shorts. What's been your strategy as far as where you've posted it?
Yeah. That's a great question. So I started like on Twitter, and I've grown like a decent following there because of the YouTube channel and some other things I've done in the past. So I know that there was a base there, and I think that when something pops off in Twitter, it does really well, right? So that was the initial like not even a strategy, I will say, because it all started for the fact that I had this idea. And I needed a reason to not give up on it. So for me, usually that means like sharing it with the world. So that was my first place that I knew at least I would have some eyes on it. So I'll just share it. I'll force myself to make this, to commit. This is my game. But Twitter, I think Twitter has this really powerful thing that when it works really well. Even though it's filled with like fake interactions and it's really messy like there, but when it works, it does work really well. And then when we start kind of like actual production and setting deadlines and setting features and all of that, then I moved to short form. So the short form, it's also like a really good strategy to get an audience that's completely outside of that bubble. Because I do understand like YouTube and Twitter, they generate these like very specific bubbles of game dev enthusiasm, you know? But I think it is really important to, yeah, kind of like get in touch with the audience. And the reality of things is that your audience, will be very young. In most cases, will be very young. Will be on Instagram, YouTube Shorts, and also TikTok. So that's where we're posting the most, like the shorts. You'll listen to my voice a lot explaining the same concept again and again, but it's just a way to like capture a new audience, because at the end of the day, it is extremely important not just to get eyes on your game, but to get the reality, which is like just gamers, And so it's good and also at the same time scary to leave that bubble of game dev enthusiasm, because as the name implies, it's filled with enthusiasm, and with exposure to the world, of course, it means anything can come your way. But it's very important as a person, as a developer. So that's where we're posting the most.
Okay, yeah, and is TikTok or Instagram super successful for you? Because the only one that I went in and researched was YouTube Shorts, and there were good views in there, but I didn't see anything that like went mega viral that would lead me to believe, if I was just looking at that you would have hit 100,000 wish lists. So, is there another platform that's doing well, or is it just a consistent, nice flow of views? And I think when I say a nice flow, like between maybe 20 and 50K per video, which is nothing to sneeze at, but not viral in the sense of like I've seen some devs get, millions per short. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, Instagram is the one, I think.
Instagram. Okay.
It's funny because it started with TikTok. And then it moved to Instagram, where like Instagram is absolutely bonkers because of the amount of techniques that you use to sort of engage the audience, I think work differently in YouTube, even though it is shorts. And I think it's completely different. So in Instagram, for example, our most popular video is at 1.1 million views.
Congratulations.
So
That's exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, it's wild. Like I'm telling you, it's a completely new experience because it's a completely different thing to interact with people that are even like that don't interact too much with the game development space, and so they're just like consumers. And so you read all different things and you reach all the most like specific kind of people. But yeah, Instagram is the one that is right now hitting the hardest. And the original tweet I just told you, that one is the one maybe they're responsible for the kind of access to the content, because the tweet, if I'm not mistaken, it has like 10 million views, which is like, let's not even get into it because it's unbelievable. It's
Sure.
wild. It's like no one is ever prepared to be in a situation where something of yours, of your imagination, your creation goes that access. I can just be grateful, but I cannot explain it. I cannot even think about it too much. But Twitter was the first, I think, like the first responsible to what is possible on Instagram and TikTok is to keep a consistency, like you said, so to kind of like post there, find more audience, find more audiences. So that's where you have to put the hard work. It's just continue talking about your game, make sure it's like on people's mind, and that's kind of it.
If you need help with indie game development, well, I have the place for you. Come and check out the Dev Dream Discord. Now, something cool that's been happening is a group of members have gotten together for a community-led accountability group. We have channels specifically for marketing or gameplay feedback if you need someone to take a look at the stuff you've made. And ultimately, it's just a great place to make some friends and join people for this journey that can be very isolating. So there's a lot of resources there, and we're having a ton of fun. And also, it's completely free to join. So I hope to see you there. The link is in the description, and let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, amazing. It sounds like Twitter and Instagram are your kind of bread and butter. Just one question about that big post on Twitter that really popped off. Was it a video where like a short form, or was it just a regular text tweet?
No, it was video. It was video, but it's not short form. Well, I guess I'm like assuming that short form is like vertical. But no, this was like a normal announcement trailer.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, it was an announcement trailer. I think that because of the type of work that I've had over the years, I had to learn how to communicate things very properly, right? So I don't know. It's hard to say what is skill and what is just luck, but I made the trailer and I try to make my best work to communicate what were you doing in the game, like in 2 seconds. And the reality of like the internet and scrolling and everything is that you kind of have to be in that position where you gets people attention to understand what you mean. It's not to convince anyone. You're not convincing people. It's more like, give me 2 seconds. Trust me kind of situation. So in the trailer that I did for Twitter, like it's like a little bit of a football footage, but then the camera pans out. Boom. So you have this kind of like reveal moment. In the I think in the already second 2, you were already in the reveal mode. So I think that was really helpful. And the caption also is like really far. Like, I'm working on a game where you play as a virtual referee. So these are things that are easy to comprehend, easy and fast. So yeah, I think on Twitter, things outside of short form do really well, actually. Like even like, I don't know, 1-minute videos. I've seen 1-minute videos doing well, so like I said, Twitter is a really like hit or miss, so I'm grateful that it worked out.
Yeah, very cool. Well, congratulations again. I think it would be
Thanks.
nice to transition the conversation to talk about your game a little bit to help people understand what it is you've been marketing. So tell me about Eye of the Match. What's the elevator pitch for the game? I mean, maybe you just said the whole thing, you're a referee, but anything else to add for the game and how you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, so there are a few elevator pitches. First one and the easiest one for people who are familiar with games is like, it's papers, please, but you are a virtual referee, whatever you want to call that, VAR, a virtual assistant referee. But it helps because as soon as I say that, people understand that you're going to be in a position where you inspect and you have to be bureaucratic about the decisions that you're making. So that's an easy way to kind of. The other way of looking at it is it's Severance, but for football referee. So for those
Incredible.
of you watching Severance, yeah, like the same position of working at a company, like super super blanked out, like you're doing some sort of very integral job to survive. So those are my main references when I think about it. It's just like Papers, Please in the game space, and then Severance for like the direction, visuals, and narrative overall. But yeah, so yeah, like you play as a virtual referee, and so the decision of making you play as a virtual referee, there's a lot of reasons. I've said this a couple of times where like I often do this exercise to think about making games that are a little bit out there, like just like trying to be fresh and creative. So an easy way to kind of like do this exercise is to always think the opposite. That's an easy exercise, it's just like, you usually do this. What if you do this, And so I often talk about how my first idea was that I thought, well, yeah, maybe you're the field referee. So like the actual one running, with the players and then doing that. And to be completely honest with you, just from a developer standpoint, the night I had that idea, I was just like on the shower thinking like, but that sounds boring from a development standpoint. Like considering the fact that I knew I was going to solo it most of the time. I was like, I don't want to create a entire football simulation just so that you're running around. So I let that idea go for a while, but then, I was like, wait. Because then when Papers, Please came to mind, I thought about the fact that you could inspect things as they come one by one. So in the case of Papers, Please is like the passports. But then I thought like, wait, what if you get like the replay? Right. And so that's why I'm playing with the whole idea of getting a tape. Of course, it's like very retro futuristic aesthetic. So you get a replay tape. and that is the object that you use to kind of like inspect, and then you kind of like create your report by labeling the tape. So that physicality, first and foremost, like gameplay wise, because I'm a very gameplay oriented person, just felt awesome. And I knew that if the game idea started to work, I could move into more of what Papers, Please and Severance want, which is like, okay, you have this really cool tactile mechanic. What can you now entail on corruption, on moral decisions and stuff? So the potential, I remember just thinking like, oh, there's so many things I could do and talk about. But as soon as I got a nice prototype, I was pretty happy, and yeah, just had to find ways to kind of like force myself to finish it because you know, no, game development is hard to like have an idea and have imposter syndrome and think like, oh, is this really all of that? So yeah, that's the game. And so I'm currently working on just having it be like have a lot of content that is interesting. Like I said, like I think I have no doubts about the interaction about the game. I think what needs to hit home, which is the most important part and the most play tested part and everything, is that sort of like the context. Like the context of the game design matters a lot, because if you have a mechanic that allows you to do A or B, then you just choose whatever is best for you. But if you have context, that's a completely different thing. So it's important for me to kind of just like humble up and learn about with the masters, like with Lucas Pope on Papers, Please, and other games that have like important decisions with important consequences and important context.
Yeah, okay. This is really interesting because that's part of the thing that I was curious about in the development of this game. Like, you kind of understand it right away of what you're doing, but then I was like, well, how do you flesh that out in just making this decision into a whole game? So can you give me one layer back behind the curtain of like, what's an example of giving context and making that decision feel important to players? Or maybe another way to ask the question would be, just how are you handling the consequences? Like, is there always a right answer and a wrong answer? Or just kind of how does the game actually play out in that way?
Yeah. So as I've been building the game, I think the important thing that I've found out is these correlations with real life. So one thing that is important about kind of like decision making on, I guess, football is that you can have multiple interpretations of how something goes. So to answer your question, I think it's easier to move to the concept of interpretations rather than right or wrong, because the right or wrong can feel frustrating, specifically like when something is not as objective as, I don't know, passports. So that is the first thing that I noticed, like that's powerful. Like if you have interpretations, but then each interpretation will have a different precision level. That's a best, like for me as a designer, I prefer that approach to like have a precision kind of mode. So how close do you are from the rule? The second thing that is very important and crucial for the football space is that the decisions that you make, because you have two teams in play, you're always benefiting one side. So that's the thing that is really powerful, and that's the thing that I'm playing the most in the current game loop, which is the idea that, like like if you're trying to be precise or not, you might end up being too like having too much bias towards one team, So in terms of game balancing and game design, I am making sure that the player has different reasons why they would want to even out the bias or like push if there's a case in which like one side's want you to push and is giving you an incentive to push. And yeah, without ruining too much of the surprise, but like I think that's the core, of that loop, is just thinking about how precise I am with my interpretations and how am I being perceived about the teams, and then on top of that, you can just sprinkle things that are very common to the loop of game, like inspection games, where you're just giving context events, you're just giving context moments of, you're just saying like this player, they're the star player of the team, because every player has like the star player. So this player is a star player, so watch out. Like if you give him punishment, be sure to make fair. Otherwise, your precision will go down. Like some of these things are the elements that you can play with. And like I said before, this is the most important part, is just to make it hit hard, because the mechanics feel nice, but of course now we're doing a lot of like testing and figuring out to see, is it really powerful for me to be in a position where I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do, because like the right thing is to give the red card, but the consequences are too strong. So that's a potential for sure. So that's how I'm dealing with it.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear about all these layers that can be added to this game that on the surface I wasn't sure how the complexity would be introduced. So that's really interesting. Why do you think this game is resonating with people so much?
Okay. Actually think that everyone that watches the sport, first of all, I think is the power dynamic. Like if you've ever watched the sport, or any sport for that matter, with your family, with your friends, you have been in that position in a way where you're just like, but obviously, like if you look at the rule book, it says so. I think that first of all, there's a fantasy position that puts you in a position where people want to be most of the time, and you can't because life won't put you as a referee out of nowhere. So first, that's the first point, right? Is like I love games that can allow you the fantasy of putting you in a position where you cannot occupy, which I think is like the strength of the medium for sure. I think the second thing is people who watch football know that there's something going on, and it always depends on like the power, the amount of money involved in the league that you're watching, whatever. But there's always this kind of like sentiment, and this is common between everyone that watches football. Like you're always unsure, is this completely fair? Is like are there external factors that are making the referee make a decision or not? So I think that there's this inherent curiosity on this world of that people don't talk about, because it's like an invisible science going on behind the doors. So it's just an opportunity for people to explore it from one perspective, from in within the virtual referee world. So I think that's why it resonates with people, and uh, I think like the reason why I made the game to begin with is because I was like, yeah, I would like to know. Yeah, I would like to know why I wouldn't be so correct about the decisions. Like, why isn't it so easy? Like, I think just making empathetic design is pretty interesting from the get-go. Like, I think it's too easy for us to go like, oh, obviously this is but then there's many factors. And hopefully, like that's what I want to present in the game loop. And I think that's what people are expecting. Like, what are the things that are gonna stop me from being precise? So I think people are really drawn to that idea. And yeah, I just really hope that we can do that, like that we can hit that home. Just gonna close the window because there's like some
Yeah, you're good. I did hear that, but that's okay.
Spanish shouting people.
You're okay. You're okay. Okay, that's really interesting about this power dynamic and this tension of whether or not it's totally fair or everyone's on an equal playing field or not. Something I wanted to circle back to from when you were talking at the very beginning was you started to get into this idea of hook, or what's drawing people in, and it sounded like also maybe what you were saying would align with maybe like what Jonas Tyroller says, which is that like the fantasy is everything, like at the highest level. Is what you just described, would you say that that is kind of the hook in the fantasy, like this sort of abstract idea of would I be fair, and also the power to take control? Or is there anything else in there that you would say is a part of this hook or this fantasy that people want to live out?
Yeah, the fantasy is. I'm not gonna say 100%, but it is a big part for sure. So I do agree with that. I think of course like gameplay is also important, right? But I think that you know sometimes when you're working on a game, you have to remember that the game mechanics won't be necessarily the most unique thing ever because it has been applied in another fantasy, right? So I think the idea behind that thought is like let's not focus too much on like what you can do input wise as a player, but more like what is the world that you're affecting, right? So even like there's a book by Steve Swink. It's called Game Feel, Guide to Virtual Sensation, something like that. And there's a moment in the book that where he's describing all these things that compose good game feel. and it's really interesting because it's like very psychological, very scientific. So it's kind of like talking about, hey, you can make your control be super precise and you can have the character react. But then there's a portion of that like third circle that composes the entirety of a good game feel, is that the context of, not necessarily the context of what you're doing narrative wise, but where are you applying those actions? Like there is no game feel, there's no proper game feel if you don't have, the space that provides you the information. So I really agree on that, even though that's more focused on the action to action. I do think that it brings us back to fantasy because I need to feel like, why am I doing this? What's the world in which I live, or am I portraying these things? So I would say I agree. I think that's a really strong point for sure.
Yeah, something you brought up twice now is just this importance of context, and maybe another way of saying that, if I'm hearing you right, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is like giving the player a reason to care or helping them understand their place in the world. Is that kind of what you're talking about? And why do you think this is not a topic that I feel like, or at least the way that it's phrased, is not something a lot of other developers talk about? Where do you think this connection for you with context comes from?
I'm learning this as I go. I think it's important for us to kind of recognize the side of, I don't think I knew things from the get-go. I think different types of game require different types of like interactions. So I do think that if for this type of game, I think that it comes from the idea of it's feasible to do like mechanics that allow you to do one thing or another. And mechanically, you can make that work and you can balance it out. But I think that the weight of each thing that you make can dramatically change based on context. And this is something I'm learning because of the type of game that I'm making, right? So because I have to research like what's Papers, Please doing, what's like a game like BioShock, for example, as well, is I recently saw a video that was talking about this, about like the power of context. So it's a perfect, I guess, reference for this topic as well. But just, like the idea that in BioShock, you can choose to grab the power from it's a little sister. I forgot the name, but
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I don't remember the specific
so
name, but
you can
yes.
spare them, or you can grab the power. But by grabbing the power, you are essentially eliminating the little sister, I think is how I call it. But anyways, and in the video describes the idea that, like if you just give that to a regular player as a mechanic, you say, you want power? No power. There's no weight, right? There's no context. So in a way, you're always just making the person choose, I want the power. But at the moment that you present the idea that the little sister is like a child, and so you would be essentially eliminating them, is like, whoa, I don't know. And it's not necessarily adding anything to the system of the game on the bigger level, but it's making you really think about the decision that you're taking. So that's kind of like the weight, so that's why I talk about context so much, and that's something I'm learning as I go with this particular game, is that sure, I can give you the option, like, do you want to be fair or unfair? If you just give people a rule book of the rules and you score them based on the precision, then most people would just want to be precise. Like they either want to be precise or they would just find no reason at all to just miss everything. But that's where kind of context comes in. So that's like the really powerful thing that I haven't myself like applied that in a previous game that I worked, because I worked in so much games where not like context wasn't necessarily the strongest thing. But I do think that for the eye of the match, context matters a lot, and that's why it just I think I want the game to hit like that point well. I don't think it needs to be perfect or anything, but I just think it needs to affect you in that point where it's like, oh, that's interesting. Now I have a real decision to make in terms of what do I do. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you for breaking that down.
Yeah.
Speaking of context, I think it would be nice to give the audience a little bit more context about the development of Eye of the Match. So I know that you posted about it roughly 4 months ago, was like kind of your first post. Another reason it's been incredible, you've hit 100K so quickly. But had you done development very long before that, or how long was this game circling in your head, or was that just a quick prototype?
You know, um, I don't consider it a long thing because it was just a weekend prototype kind of thing, and it never had the consistency of of kind of like going back to it every weekend. For example, some weekends I would, some weekends I wouldn't. But I think like half of last year, I would say, is where I kind of like started tinkering with the idea. But I always just had like my main job and my regular 9 to 5, and overall just like chilling, living life overall. So yes, I would say like I started tinkering with it like at the half of last year, towards the end of the year. So it's really hard to tell you because I don't remember precisely, but towards like sort of the end, it's where I was like, I don't want to give up on this idea. I want to try it more. So like I started tinkering on it more and more, to the point where I vividly remember. So February kind of is like when it's Brazil. Like I'm from Brazil, but when it's Carnival in Brazil, I actually went there to visit my family and stuff. Like that's when I really had like a solid plan. Like I actually want to do this. So I consulted with people that I grew up. I was like, I don't know, I just did this. Like, what do you think? Kind
Yeah.
of thing. And like I like to polish things a lot for sure. So I'm not gonna deny that. So it was polished. It had like a lot of different mechanics in place. And so, props to all my friends. Like they were all like, do it. And it's like the strength I needed for sure for people to be like, just do it, just open a Steam page. And thank God I did. We can go over that later, but I think it's we can talk about the how magnificent it is to have a Steam page as early as possible. But we'll get into that if you want. But yeah, like I think I started like half mid last year, right? But it was just tinkering, to be completely honest with you, until I felt confident by the end of the year, and then I started like really putting like, even after work, like I'd end my 9 to 5 and then just like immediately get into it. So just get like super geeky about it and stuff. Um, but yeah, then I announced it like around 4 months ago, and around 3, I would say, that's where I started just focusing on it. And I'm so grateful that I made this decision, and that I have an audience in a way, right? So just recently, it has become my full-time thing. So that's why I want to pour as much passion as I can without burning out too much. Um, but yeah, that's kind of like the timeline.
Yeah, congrats on going full time, by the way. That's a huge deal. And props to your friends for encouraging you to
Okay.
go for it. That's really cool. Let's go ahead and jump into this idea about the Steam page and getting it up early. What are your thoughts on that?
So, um, if I knew, I really want to like emphasize this, but if I knew the amount of advantages that you have by doing it, I would have done this so many more times for so many other titles that haven't become actual games. But, I don't know if this is just an idea of like, like coming from a different economy, like while I was in Brazil, but just like the idea of, giving $100. I was like, I don't know. That, so I always felt in that position of, I don't know why, like, I don't even know if I'm going to make this game or not kind of situation. So there are a bunch of powerful reasons why. I think one, yes, emotionally, because I think it's part of the equation. Emotionally, it is an important step of the process for you to commit. Commitment is so strong. Commitment is such a powerful thing. So I think that having that, you're one step closer to the full pipeline of production. So first of all, emotional, which helped me a lot. That was like kind of the reason why I started. But as a consequence, what you get is this incredible, almost infinite repository. Because if you just dedicate one extra week, or even less, 1 week for me, because I'm not like so tech savvy at that point, but you can have a pipeline that your game, every time you make a new commit of your game, it just deploys the game to Steam automatically into a little beta branch. There's like commit go, commit go. And as far as I've researched this a lot, there is no limit. There's no limit. You can do build, 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 build. So number one, there's this automation process that will make your life so much easier. Number two is like the centralized place for playtests. You've probably seen this a lot of times, and I've experienced this a lot of times where, I don't know, people have different ways of sharing. Like, well, they'll give you they'll give you the executable. And this one will give you the page on HIO and stuff. And it's like, but if you can just have it on Steam on a branch, that's much easier. That's like point of access. And it's also one closer step to the final step, which is super good. So that's step number 2. And then step number 3 is the thing that I'm most grateful for, is because if you think about the whole idea that I was going to work on this game, do a trailer, and I intended on just showing to the world, this is what I'm working on, without a Steam page. I have no idea. Like, I cannot tell you how life goes, how it would go if I didn't do or not. All I can say is that I had a call to action. You know what I mean? Like, I had something that could measure people's excitement. I had something that could measure, and we all know how it works in game dev world, where wishlist nowadays is like this kind of currency power, right? So by having an early Steam page, that means that you can capture interest early on, right? And for everyone out there, wishlist might mean more platform access to like all the different platforms, might mean publishers. It might mean so much things, right? So it's so crucial. And so the tweet that we just started, like the conversation talking about, that tweet that has incredible and like just wild numbers. The first thing that I had, at least, I was like, yeah, if you like the idea, wishlist. And so I think that in a number of just a few days, there's like thousands and thousands of wish lists. So there was a universe, there's like a parallel universe in which I almost just posted a video without any call to action. So I'd have to recapture people again. God knows how. I have confidence in the project, sure. But again, these are the kind of things that only happen once. So you have to be ready just in case. And from a technical standpoint, it's just like, yeah, the infinite repository thing is just brilliant. Also, the fact that you can, if you have a Steam Deck, you could just grab and then put it on your library and then test. Because then I like the Steam Deck as a playtest device, because it's like the enough power, that could benchmark your game. Also gamepad, also touchscreen. So there's like accumulative reasons why, but it's so crucial. And if I could be talking to myself in the past, like years ago, I would just be like, just give $100 for like the whatever little prototype that you have, because you can, if you want to, stay on the unpublished kind of status for the longest time. It does not matter, but at least you have somewhere that's centralized. You can have automation to make your life easier, and I just think it's worth it, really. And I really stand by it now, for sure.
Okay, this is fascinating. There's a couple things there that I want to actually dive in a little deeper on that you shared. First off, I'm really curious about this automated commit to playtest, mostly from the players. Is this just a playtest to yourself in testing, or do you have an open playtest or a demo, or what are you actually pushing? And is it just for yourself, or are you actually letting other people play the game already?
No, I let people play. So the way I'm currently doing it right now, with at least with like the friends and close partners kind of relationship, I have a branch. So Steam also has the concept of branches, which is wild, which I never ever explored. But the same way every game has a beta branch, you could have like a pre-release something branch. There's a very specific repository of the game that you just deploy. And so it's super easy because I can give people the key of the game, right? Steam has this system that, of course, for me, it doesn't matter, but you can revoke them if you actually want the people to buy it, which again, I don't think it matters too much. But yeah, like I give people the key of the game, so they already kind of own the game, but the game does not have like a public version of it available.
Gotcha.
So they can only access the game to the thing. And of course, there's different offers that Steam does. Like Steam will allow you to do the demo thing, the demo with a branch. So it kind of like inherits from there. But the way that I'm currently doing it is I just give keys to the people that I want to test now. So like around 20 people and stuff. And then it's again, if you think about also the update workflow is also incredible, because I don't have to tell people to download a new version or make sure that they're a new version. I'm just like, just press update on Steam and it will give them the latest version of that branch. So it's much more for them, really. For me, it's like the convenience of having a version that I can just make sure that it's there all the time. But the current workflow that I have is as soon as I commit a change and push it to the whatever main branch, then I have a little like GitHub action, which is something I also only learned this year, which is for all the tech savvy people there, it might be just completely obvious. Like no one has ever told me that before. I never thought about it. I always thought you had to have like a Unity Cloud account and then pay many bucks to But nowadays, with just a little research, now I have like a build machine. So I send the sort of like the action, it builds and then it deploys to Steam, and then I can just tell my play testers like, can you check this new version, and then go through the process. So I think life goes really well with a little bit of automation. Super nice.
Yeah, it sounds incredible, and both for you and the player, which is really nice. It's solving problems on both ends, which makes it easier for people to play test. So very cool. Yeah, that's something I think more people should look into. I'll have to look into it myself.
Yeah.
Do you plan to do a public demo, or have you thought about that far ahead?
Yeah, for sure. I cannot wait to do a public demo. I think, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't really know the quality, but I tend to be like, I want things to be polished. And I know personally that I have to release a little bit from that mindset. So I have to be kind of like a balanced version of that instead of, I do want the game to present the strength of context, which is just what we talked about, and also just the overall presentation. I think that I want to portray the quality that I can do in games with the demo as well, even though it can be far from completion, but I just at least want to provide that vertical slice that provides a thing. So I'm just trying to fit a good moment. I've heard from different sources, oh, you should do the demo closer to release. Or some people say it doesn't matter that much nowadays. So it's a really hard concept to kind of like grasp. So I'm always careful about just putting the demo, and then because I'm not sure exactly the distance, I don't want to put people in a position where they play and they're just craving even more, because people are already like craving, which is great. But like, imagine if you're playing like, but I just wanna play it. So I want to have like, from a marketing beat or a production beat kind of standpoint, I do think it's nice to have demo, period, boom, release. So I mean, like, I wish things don't change too much, but my plan was like the October Next Fest would be incredible. I hate committing to things from a perspective of promising, because I've seen many other examples of projects that, for one reason or another, had to delay, had to change, or even like a deal with a platform or whatever. So like things move around, and I don't love to be in a position where like I say things and then they change fast. So, but being honest with you, like I think the October Next Fest would be like a super nice milestone to just like, can we do that? Perfect. If not, like we'll just find when the next window for a good demo would be. But in my personal heart, I would love the Next Fest to be the place where kind of like people get access to it for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You've also mentioned this idea of polish a couple times, and how you're a person that really likes to polish things. So my one question back to launching your Steam page and getting that up really early, but you also mentioned that you did like to polish it before you even showed it to your friends and stuff. So what do you think is the balance of putting that Steam page up versus polishing the game and posting about it and stuff like that?
So I guess it really depends on your standards of what is polish, because I think different people have different standards of, oh, this is super polished, this is not, even from the state where I post the game, even though I know I'm wrong and this is over perfection, but I think it wasn't polished in a way, so I think right about that point would be a nice balance, because there's enough visual material that people understand the flow of your game uh, without looking at things weird, like, oh, this doesn't, I don't like this. But if it portrays the idea of visually what you're trying to achieve, I think it works. Like, for example, I can only talk about Eye of the Match now, but, like in Eye of the Match, the models that I made I had this plan like, oh, maybe I should invite someone to at some point do like actual proper meshes and stuff and models. But so before I had that, I just like decided to make the models myself of the computer, of like the things that are on the side, and there's some placeholder images that I was using, like literally from Google. Um, so I wasn't satisfied from that perspective, but it was enough to convey the experience. And I think it's just something that you learn with practice, really. Like as even the most how do you say this? Yeah, even the people that want the experience to be the polished the most, you do learn after time that like your time is a resource. So I cannot like be so finicky about like the details, you know? I think I want to, and I'm trying to achieve the balance between kind of like, okay, here's my vision, but here's like the time that I have so that I don't feel burnout and I'm crafting this impossible thing forever. So yeah, even for that first trailer, like the things that I have that I think a lot of people considered like polished. I think I wasn't enough like satisfied because there's a lot of things that I was like, no, actually, there's no, the goal post doesn't even have a net, you know. But again, like I had to learn myself. Actually, as you can see, it worked. You transmitted the idea. So the good thing about I Have the Match is that it teaches, like, it's teaching me a lot about just like what is the version that you want the game to be. It's one completely thing. Like it's a one singular thing. The other thing is what's the actual like real version of the game, right? I think we have to remember that releasing the game or producing the game or making sure that your game has a scope is an art on itself. So it's a really hard balance because of course, when you think about the craft and the dedication that you put into something, especially when you come up with it like out of your brain, you know? Um, I think we often associate like the highest standards for your craft. But the problem is specifically with like commercial games, it's like part of the art is the art of delivering. So that's why like I often talk about this idea of you have to share what you have. You have to test the waters in some way. Right? So there is no level of, let's say I decided on the first trailer to spend just 2 more months polishing it. If I'm being completely honest with you, like I think that if your game will capture, if it has potential to capture people's attention, it will probably do it before those 2 months of just like the extra refinement. And this is hard for me to say as someone who loves to refine game like towards like perfection or impossible perfection, which I totally know about. I do think that you have to be strategic and you have to remember like actually yeah, like it's not the final plant, but if I just put a plant here uh and it resonates with people, it doesn't matter if that plant was there. So I think that's how I think about it for sure. And it's a really, I'm not saying it's easy. It's like it's a balancing act really, but that's how I am approaching it, and I'm learning as I go.
Yeah, it sounds like this is maybe a little more art than science, and it's just kind of something you have to learn and something you just have to be thinking about. But that is really helpful to hear kind of your thought process behind how you're balancing polish versus showing and getting things out there. But I do really appreciate the sentiment that you think that you said that stuck with me is just like what's the level of polish you need to convey what you need to convey. I think that could be a benchmark for people to realize they don't have to perfect it, but just make sure that it delivers that sort of vibe or whatever it is you're looking for to deliver. Make sure they get that. So I do think that's really helpful.
To sort of like, yeah, I think to sort of ground it up a little bit more scientific, if we want, we can go back into that book of Steve Swink, which I'm like huge fan of the book and the person. But the book is really interesting because the first time and this is like a long time ago, but the first time I started reading the book, I thought it was going to be very objective, like good game feel is like screen shake or something like that.
Sure.
But it goes deep down into like psychological aspects of it, right? And that's that's a really interesting part of the book. And of course, like I recommend people reading it. But one fundamental thing that the thing said that is scientific is that a lot of people think that game feel is a combination of these visual effects and kind of like things on the environment that are reacting in your input. Sure, but there's a scientific explanation to all of that, which I think are things that you can invest in when you're doing the Steam page kind of like release. Is that it's not necessarily about the graphics, it's about feedback. And the book goes deep down into like the fact that the reason why your brain perceives something or feels something as good is because it's understandable, it's like quickly understandable. So that's why we talk so much about make your enemy blink, or make like when you hover your mouse over an object, like again, it's not about how look does the highlight or like the squishiness of a thing when you hover on it. It's more that your brain loves the idea that you have minimum input and maximum output, because our brain has like a time frame that it processes thing. So in this loop, like in this singular loop, you were able to make me understand, oh, I am about to grab the object. Your brain loves that. And I think it's easy to kind of like misunderstand that as like, oh yeah, it's good visual effects. Yeah, it might be good visual effects, but it's like the idea that it's portraying the reasoning of the brain. So if I hit an enemy and it doesn't blink, your brain is just like 1 cycle, 2 cycles, 3 cycles. Oh, yeah, I hit it, because it needs feedback. So scientifically speaking, I do think that when you're doing the first prototype of the game, and of course, like you should focus on game systems and balancing and the whole game flow. But now that you're talking about presentation, now that we're going to Steam page, make sure to capture these things that are relative to game feel, because I think that people will be able to see that. They won't be able to explain why, but their brains will be satisfied with what they're seeing, because they see that the game reacts, that the game is crafted, that there's like attention to detail. So I think in a presentation standpoint, scientifically explaining, make sure that people's brain are satisfied when you put it on the Steam page, for sure.
Yeah, I love that analogy or that description. It sounds like I need to buy this book as well. So
It's
I'll have to take a look at that.
it's good. It's good. Trust me. It's like I live by it, honestly. And it's like it's 10 years old by this point. But my entire kind of like early days on the career of game on the industry, I've been I've been like talking about this book so much. So it's always full circle, because I think some things don't change. Even though the industry changes a lot, I think some core principles about how gamers react to your craft, they always stay fundamentally the same. So it's very important for me.
Yeah, that's very cool. And then this idea of like closing the loop very quickly or helping the brain understand very quickly. I can definitely wrap my head around that with like a fighting game. Like you hit the enemy and they blink, or you get hit and their screen shake. Is there anything like that in your game that you've implemented, that sort of quick maybe feedback or something like that?
Yeah, with that kind of game, I think sound is extremely powerful. And sound is that type of layer that will portray a lot of information, what's going on. Uh, Correct input, wrong input, but especially in my game where there's like so much interaction that it's meant to be tactile, anything that makes it clear that the tactile thing happened or is about to happen are extremely important. So when you're hovering over the tape to grab things, to move around, when there's like a change in focus of camera, all these things have to be like clearly indicated. Otherwise, you just stay there for like a second. You're like, what did I just do? So especially with these type of games, I don't really know how to describe them, but it's just like first person, yeah, kind of like POV. You're interacting with objects and you're doing certain things. It's so interesting because when I was prototyping the game, I had like all these systems and I had all the visual feedback really like early on, thought about like how is it going to highlight the objects and what outline system I'm doing. And I was just doing that. And, you know, I know that sound, often people that comes as an afterthought, people should say it shouldn't come as an afterthought. There's like many discussions about that. And even I am on the side of actually it should come early on. But I wasn't. I was just like focusing on this one thing and it was just like leaving it on the side. And then one day I was like, you know what? I'll just change the environment a little bit. So I'll just put some sound in. And it completely changed like the game feel. It completely changed the experience, and it made me even more excited to share it with the world, because I felt then after the sounds were implemented, I was like, now I can convey the information a lot more, because it's completely different to take the tape and take all these sample sounds for tape injection and tape extraction, like all these retro sounds and computer sounds, like all the things that, because of the game's theme, there's like yeah, like the environment is so important. So I do think that sound is crucial for sure, for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, we've got several segments that I had prepared questions for, but we are closing in on our time a little bit. So I'm gonna jump ahead to getting some thoughts from you on some game dev advice to the people listening, because you've been able to go full time now. You are kind of at that stage that a lot of people are striving for, and so I'd love to hear some feedback that you have for some devs in the audience. So let's say for the developer that they're just sort of at the very beginning of their journey. Maybe they've downloaded Unity, maybe they're just watching podcasts and things like that. What do you think is the best way to begin getting into game dev?
Yeah. I will give a personal experience that I had that I still think that holds up very well to this day. I think that in your learning process, you should always find milestones that are bit-sized, right? And I'll share the personal experience why I think this is great. So I'm from Brazil, and so I was there in Brazil, and I was like eager to learn game development and get into it. I thought I wasn't going to be able to code, but whatever, that's another topic. But then I had this opportunity to learn and to do an exchange program. So I did, and I went to study in the US. And then on that specific class that I made, without going too much to details, but in that specific class that we were learning Unity, the way in which like our teacher approached the teaching was that every week we would learn a fundamental. And then at the end of the week, or like the start of the next week, we would do an assignment, a little project. So literally a mini game with that fundamental, right? So every week we were doing a mini game. It does not matter the quality, right? We were just doing a mini game. So we were reinforcing the idea of that concept that we learned in small chunks, and you're repeating and repeating. Now, of course, like this is not like a news bit for everyone, but I do think that the really powerful thing about kind of like choosing small projects also has to do with the satisfaction that you feel yourself for completion. And that is crucial for game development, is the fact that if you already start with a project that is so long, it does not matter. Like, I'm not trying to attribute quality to anyone. I do think that you will be frustrated at some point because you are learning. So you are learning, you will have like a vision of something bigger that you want to do. But because you have to produce and learn at the same time, you're going to have a hard time. So it's much better to work in small chunks, because one, you will have this gratification of finishing something because inevitably the scope will be small. And you can also shift from genre to genre if we're being very objective. You know, like I think that you don't necessarily have to do a 2-year project to begin with. You could just start exercising with different genre, maybe an FPS, then you do a puzzle game. And then you're getting like this richness in thought, and you're problem solving for different cases. And then by the end of it, you'll notice that you're becoming a good, solid game developer from core knowledge, because you will know how different game genres are solving different problems. And the same thing goes for my channel, where like, because I did a channel where I was recreating game mechanics, and then I had to move on to the next one because there's more videos to come, you're kind of just like jumping between disciplines, and you're just like earning experience points. You're just like, okay, getting it, right? So I do think that a little bit of preparation before you dive into the dream project is often necessary. It's not like a big piece of news, but I do think that it's refreshing, because gratification, we're all human beings. Gratification is such an important point of the process of feeling that your things are being done, that you have a portfolio, that you've done this, that you've done that, that you've done this, and you're just going to have experience. So I think it's really important for sure. And yeah, I think one of the best way to do that is probably joining game jams. You know, game jams are also a great experience because you get the sense of full production in a weekend, which is wild. But it's good to meet people. It's good to have fun. It's good to try things, and good to accept failure as well. Just as you may notice, I focus a lot on the emotional aspect, but I do think it's important. It's important for you to remember Nothing's perfect. You have to fail. And I think there's like a famous phrase, right? Like fail quicker, something like
Mhm.
that. I think that's probably the way I would say, just like find ways for you to just mess up faster so you can mess up, mess up, mess up, and then you eventually will kind of like crave whatever. You will craft, sorry. You will you will adjust your threshold of your quality and your in your game development.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, something I have appreciated about this conversation with you, Andre, is that you are tapped into that sort of mental and emotional piece, which I think we do lose in game dev sometimes. You know, we are a very technical group of people and we like the answers to the problems, but there is something more abstract about the way we feel about our creativity and the ways we can set ourselves up mentally to feel good about our work. So, yeah, I think that's something even as a community we could get better at kind of acknowledging those parts of the journey. And so I've really enjoyed that about this conversation. Um, yeah, well, kind of closing in here to wrap up this conversation. I've got two more questions for you. Um, is there any game dev, like the big game dev community advice that you disagree with or that you have a different take on?
Um, hmm, I don't know. I don't know, because usually when I read advice, it's probably good. Um, I think, yeah. I don't know if it's written somewhere. It's hard to say to you, like, if I read that somewhere, but I do think that um, sharing earlier is better. Uh, you know, I haven't necessarily remembered the last time I read that or someone said that out loud, but I do think that sharing early is better. Like I said, maybe it does have to do with the emotional aspect of things. It's like I've learned through myself, and I'm still learning. But I do think that the aspect of you understanding that you are supposed to fail, and that your project isn't perfect, is so important. So someone might tell you like, don't share early because nowadays people are like taking ideas away and stuff. There's like that fundamental thought. And there's not like, I'm not saying there's like right or wrong, like so easy like that. But I do think that it's much easier for us to let go of some of these things, because uh the games that are out there is because people share and talk. Like there's only so much that you can hold in within. And I think truly it makes me a better game developer. And I believe that it makes people a better developer if you just show your things. Um, because like even on the game development process of making Out of the Mesh right now, sometimes I just have to like share what I'm thinking about, because especially with a solo-ish project, I say that because then now like I'm able to like freelance people, so it's not like so much solo anymore. But especially on that mindset, you have this kind of like idea that you know it all, even if you write it
Hmm.
down and stuff. But it's important for you to just sit down with friends or actual like critical people in the industry and whatever, just what you think about this, and just embrace it all. Like there's no I understand this better than you. I don't actually believe in that, especially in the game medium, which is like the final consumer plays, interacts, moves your game. So impossible to craft without the end output of the experience. So helps that I come from the UX kind of like world. So that's kind of it.
Yeah, love that mindset. And yeah, let me leave you with one final question. This has been such a fantastic conversation.
I
It's been
appreciate it.
a pleasure chatting with you.
Same.
But this is the Dev Dream podcast, and I made it to inspire mostly myself, but also others to follow this journey of game dev. And I'm always inspired by hearing about the dreams and aspirations of other developers. So for you, Andre, what would you say is your game dev dream in this season of life?
In this season, uh I'll give you no wait, it's this season, so yeah, it can be.
You answer it however you want. I just phrase it that way to give people the flexibility that our dreams change, our circumstances change, and just how you're feeling today, even. But you can feel free to answer it however you like. It's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah. Very simple one is, and this comes from a perspective of just the state of the industry. My dream is just to be able to continue doing this and being supported with this and being able to make a living out of this, because there's no better feeling in the world that just like crafting and doing special experiences and just living with that, right? Of course, like it has the consequence of now it's your business, but no, there's something beautiful about it, like just being able to do that, especially in the state of the industry right now. There's like so many layoffs and so much insecurity. If I'm given the opportunity to just kind of like do this forever and people will still be interested by the things that I do, honor, huge honor. And then the unrealistic one is just like, somehow I would love to work collaborate with Nintendo.
That's awesome.
I just
Yeah.
have to say that one because
Yeah.
that's the kid one, like that's the kid inside of me going like, 1 second.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
You see, like the dream just came in. It's making me think that I'm more emotional than I am. Hold on. No, yeah, but I just had to say that because, like it's yeah, it's and it's not just sort of like this kind of like attachment thing from childhood. It's also because the way I deal with game development has a lot to do with how they approach it, which is always like gameplay first. So I really appreciate, and I still do, like the play more Nintendo games than often. So I still appreciate it. So yeah, somehow, even having one of the games in their consoles, it's like dreams come true. And Nintendo, if you're interested, let's talk.
Well, Andre, that's a fantastic dream. I hope you're able to make it a reality. Thanks for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, same for you. Same for you. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure.